Check 1, 2. Good morning, church. It is good to be with you on this lovely January morning. My name is Lori Bilby, and I'm one of a team of worship associates that have the honor of welcoming you today and of serving South Church along with our settled minister, Reverend Ellen Quadras, and our director of Lifespan Ministry, Kirsten Hunter. Please note that both assisted listening devices and large print hymnals are available for your use at the rear of the sanctuary, if that would make your worship experience a little better. The music today is graciously offered by our director of music ministry, Johnny Pfeiffer, and our pianist, Susan Adams, and what a great prelude with 4 hands on that piano. Huh? Our time for all ages this morning will be offered by Jen Del Deo, and we invite our young people to either head downstairs for additional programming after that or stay here with their families in the sanctuary. Hello to everyone who's watching from afar. We note that every service incorporates many other hearts and hands behind the scenes, and we thank all of those people as well, as noted in your order of service. So thank you for joining us this morning. Whether you're here for the first time, or returning after an absence, or attend as often as possible, whether you are here in person or online. For those who are here, we do look forward to sharing some conversation and refreshments with you after the service. And now I think Jen Del Deo has a couple of announcements.
Good morning. First, you'll notice that staff is wearing masks today, and I see a lot of masks out there, which is great. Just a reminder that church policy is that if you've had an exposure to COVID, we ask that you mask for 5 days. We had an exposure earlier in the week at the office, so as long as you're feeling well and testing negative, just please wear a mask so that we can keep each other all safe. And your order of service is filled with a lot of announcements. I just want to highlight 2 things that are coming out. One is that next Sunday, January 22nd, there's a meeting about the budget that will happen on Zoom after worship. So you can find the information here with the Zoom ID and everything. And then the following Sunday, January 29th, is our annual congregational meeting. And that will be hybrid, that you can attend that here in person, or you can stream it also. Again, that will be after worship. And both of those things are part of our democratic process at work. Unitarian Universalism is a little bit unique in that congregations govern themselves to a large degree. So we make all our decisions, set our budgets, and that's what happens at both of those meetings. So I encourage you to attend. Thank you.
As we light our chalice this morning, we encourage those of you watching online to light a chalice in your space as we invite the flame to kindle in our hearts these words from Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from a Birmingham jail. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. I invite you now to rise in body and spirit and join me in the mission statement, which is printed in your order of service. At South Church, we nurture spiritual growth through worship, learning, and community. We celebrate the worth and dignity of all people and inspire one another to act on our faith in the larger community. Please be seated. My Black friend died just over a year ago. There are a couple of problems with this sentence, aren't there? First, I miss my friend Carol. Colleagues for several years, she was bright and funny and thoughtful. She was for quite some time our IT person in the office, and I often pitched in back when I still understood the technology, and we had to do more physical things like periodically adding RAM into our office PCs or setting up new workstations. Our backgrounds were both pretty different and fairly similar. We were both raised in very white communities. We went to college. We both moved to New England. But, Carol was a devout Baptist. I was not. She was straight and looking for a husband. I was not. But we both liked gospel music, and several times went together to a gospel choir ensemble concert in Boston, the Boston area during February for Black History Month. And I remember being stunned at one of those that she had never heard, "We Shall Overcome," which one of the choirs sang. It's like, so I wondered aloud if she really was black, which was a running joke between us ever after. She sang in my wedding. Not "We Shall Overcome," although as I think about it, that's not wrong for a wedding. But it was more after she married and moved south that we had exchanges about race and racism. And that's in part because it's only been in more recent years that I've started paying a little more attention to those things, beginning to recognize racism not only in our culture and in our institutions, but also within my northern, liberal, white, gay self. For decades, I just assumed that I was better than all of the caricatures of racists I learned earlier in life. I appreciate that no person of color needs the added burden of helping me learn, that the work is mine to do. But it was really nice to have a friend who I could occasionally bounce thoughts off of, to check her experiences, her takes on things, reality checks. So here's the second problem. My black friend died just over a year ago. So now what? How do I honor Carol's memory by continuing to do my work on racism, but without her here? Please rise as you're able for our first hymn, number 155, Circle Round for Freedom.
Okay, it's story time. So any kids and anyone else who would like to hear the story from a little bit closer can come up now. And it's a book, so if you like to see the pictures, I especially encourage you to come closer. So, I bet that none of you have school tomorrow. Is that right? I see a thumbs up over there. Why is there no school?
Because it's Martin Luther King Jr. Day.
Because it's Martin Luther King Jr. Day. That's right. So I have a book today that is connected to the work that Martin Luther King Jr. did. He did a lot of work in the civil rights movement in the 1960s. Which probably sounds like a long time ago to some of you. Sounds like a long time ago to me. But there are a lot of people sitting in those pews who were alive in 1963. Anyone who's willing to share that they were alive in 1963, look, all those people. So sometimes we can think like, oh, all that stuff happened a long time ago. We're far removed from that. But it's not long ago, and there's still a lot of work to do with civil rights. And this book tells a story about work that children did, a really important moment that helped in the civil rights movement. So let's see what it's all about. It's called Let the Children March. It's written by Monica Clark Robinson and illustrated by Frank Morrison. "1963, Birmingham, Alabama. I couldn't play on the same playground as the white kids. I couldn't go to their schools. I couldn't drink from their water fountains. There were so many things I couldn't do." This book is written in the voice of an African American child. "One warm spring night, my family went to church. We weren't there to have regular services. We were there to hear Dr. King speak. We were there to plan. He wanted to raise an army of peaceful protesters to fight for freedom. His brown eyes flashing fire and love, Dr. King told us the time had come to march. If I march, Mama said, I'll lose my job, sure enough. I can't march, Daddy said. I got a family to feed. The weight of the world rested on our parents' shoulders, but this burden this time did not have to be theirs to bear. I don't have a boss to fear, my brother said, or a job to lose. We can march this time. We'll be Dr. King's army, I said. I'll be fine, Daddy, I promised. Don't worry, Mama. Dr. King didn't like children being put in harm's way. He was a daddy too, after all. But he had said that though we were young, we were not too young to want our freedom. Let the children march. They will lead the way. On May 2nd, a sunny Thursday, boys and girls, brothers and sisters, cousins and friends, we all met at the church, dressed in our best, feet ready. In a silence so loud that all I could hear was my racing heart, we began to walk. Hand in hand we marched, so frightened yet certain of what was right for freedom. The path may be long and troubled, but I'm going to walk on. Would I be hurt? Would we be heard? Would it all be worth it in the end? I wanted to run from the angry faces in the crowd, run from danger, run from fear. Boys and girls, brothers and sisters, cousins and friends, on and on we marched, we marched, we marched. Singing the songs of freedom, 1,000 strong we came. Hate dogged my heels all that day, its yellowed canine teeth sharp, but courage walked by my side and kept me going. Disperse or you'll be jailed, the police shouted the first day. Disperse or you'll get wet, the police shouted the second day. Disperse or we'll release the dogs, the police shouted the third day. We did not disperse. We kept on marching. We wouldn't stop until things started to change. Hundreds of us went to jail on the first day, and even more on the second. My turn wasn't until the third day. After I was sprayed by water stronger than anything I've ever felt, rough hands pushed me forward and I fell to my knees in the police wagon. I was going to jail. Dr. King reassured our parents. Don't worry about your children, he said. They're going to be all right. Don't hold them back if they want to go to jail, for they are doing a job not only for themselves, but for all of America and for all mankind. That night, crowded into a cell too small for even half of the kids, we sang, "We Shall Overcome." Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, and freedom is coming. Our parents couldn't be there with us, but still we sang, wrapped in the proud and loving arms of our ancestors. I was still in jail, but we heard that the next day and the next, more kids marched. The water hoses they used to sting us could not stop our fierce tide. The path may be long and troubled, but I'm going to walk on. Turn the other cheek, we had been taught. Show love where there is hate. Our march would become a memory, a small part of a larger story, but we had been heard and the seeds of revolution were sown. 2 days and nights I stayed in the jail. Some stayed even longer. When I left, I was tired and sore, and my best dress was ripped. But my smile was as wide as the Mississippi River. I had made a difference. I'm so proud of you, baby girl, Mama said. Your march was what made them see. With nothing more than our feet, voices, and courage, we had done what others could not. Change was right around the corner. We felt it like a cool breeze in an Alabama August. On May 10th, the great news rang out. Dr. King had reached an agreement with the white leaders of the city. Desegregation would begin. 1 month later, I was playing on a playground I'd never been allowed to play on before. 2 months later, my family ate at a diner we'd never been allowed to eat in before. Our march made the difference. We children led the way. Singing the songs of freedom, 1,000 strong, we came. So back in October, Kirsten and I went to the spot where this happened. And in March, some of the adults in our congregation will go to that same spot. And then in June, some of our high school kids will go to that spot. And we're all going to learn about the history and to learn about the work that still needs to be done. And so I love this story because it shows that children can make a big difference. You don't have to go to jail to make a difference, but there are lots and lots of ways that you already make a difference. So let's go downstairs and talk about some of those ways.
At this point in our service, we offer an opportunity to express our gratitude, our support, and our generosity toward all of the good work and good people of South Church. During the month of January, our collection will be shared with Planned Parenthood of Northern New England, which proudly offers a full range of reproductive and sexual health care services. You can give to South Church in many ways. You can use the free Vanco app on your phone. You can send checks to the church office at 73 Court Street, and you can put cash, checks, and any other valuables you may have on your person into the offering plate. The offering will now be gratefully received.
As we enter this time of community prayer and meditation, I want to share with you a few things about folks from the congregation. One is that Greg Birdwood was recently diagnosed with kidney cancer and has given us permission to let you know, and he will be going for surgery later this month. Also, Dave Drucker had a pacemaker put in this past week. Was just released from the hospital. He's doing much better. May we hold them both in love and healing light. I now invite you to gather heart and mind for a time of deepening of meditation and prayer with these words adapted from Reverend George Kimmich Beach. God, Spirit of life, light of understanding, may we feel the touch of love and light in all our lives, warming us, steadying us, even as the light of greater truth, the higher call of love, can also unsettle our ease and upset our undue self-satisfactions. Let us wait in these moments of stillness to allow the hidden processes of healing and growth to do their silent work among us, and to let the quiet work of renewal be among us. Because we know that the ultimate issues of life, healing and growth, reconciliation and renewal, cannot be forced either by excess of activity or tumult of words, so we seek out this stillness, a resting place for our restless hearts. Because we live with mystery, may we trust that which is deeper than we know, which touches our hearts, which steadies us and rekindles our spirits. And finally, in faith, may be named the love that has laid hold on us and will not let us go. Amen. In this tender space we have created, I invite you to honor any joy or sorrow that is in you today with the lighting of candles, to publicly acknowledge what is in the privacy of our hearts. If you would like to participate, you can come forward and light a candle at one of these two lighting bowls on the left or right of the sanctuary as the music begins in a moment. And please remember, if you are going through a difficult time, I am here, as are your pastoral associates. If you need us, please fill out a card in the pew and place it in the basket on one of the candle tables, or come find me or email me after the service. We are here for you. I invite you now to light a candle for a joy or a sorrow that is on your heart. We, this country, our world, we're in kind of a mess. Income inequality is continuing to rise, disproportionately impacting people of color. In 2019, the median net worth for Black households in the greater Boston area was about $8,000. For white families, it was about $250,000, 30 times more. There's gun violence and hate crimes and racism that continues to evolve. You may have read about Keenan Anderson's death at the hands of police. He was the cousin of Black Lives Matter founder Patrisse Cullors. He just lost his life a couple weeks ago. Our democracy feels tenuous. Important rights have been lost or are at risk. Concerns about mental health of young people and adults is up. Worldwide, Ukraine is unnerving and one of too many raging conflicts. Climate change continues to manifest in frightening ways. Displaced migrants face inhuman conditions here and all over the world, and we can easily miss the ways in which all of these things are connected. As you use, we are an environmentally minded people, a peace-seeking people, a justice-focused people. And right now, it doesn't always feel like that's where the world is headed. We need leaders. We want heroes. Heroes like the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who was such a strong voice, but also a rational, nonviolent voice. We want people like him who are strong and courageous and wise. More than once, I've heard the cry for someone like Martin Luther King to return and lead us in our present day. Martin Luther King, who again and again put himself in high-stakes situations surrounded by people wishing to do him harm. He went right on leading and guiding and loving people anyway, changing the course of this country's history, laying the groundwork for healing, improving circumstances for millions of people, showing us the interconnected nature of everything and each of our parts in healing it. Martin Luther King was a leader and an inspiration, certainly to me, and every time I learn something about his leadership, I gain a little more courage and a little more insight and a little more willingness for my own next steps. And even as we desperately want good leaders, people like Martin Luther King to look up to, I don't need to tell you that we everywhere have been finding heroes and leaders to be flawed. Not just the ones we love to hate, but all of them, including Reverend Martin Luther King, who, like any human being, was not perfect. The movie Selma pointed to some of his sexual indiscretions. A while back, there was talk of plagiarism. Some have even implied his character flaws disqualify him from his place as the civil rights icon of the 1960s. King is not the only one receiving fresh scrutiny. Some of our own leaders are as well. We like to say that Thomas Jefferson was a Unitarian before Unitarianism was a thing. Jefferson, hero of this country and namesake of more than one UU church. Jefferson, as we all now know, owned more than 600 enslaved people and did not free them in his lifetime. Or there's Ralph Waldo Emerson, forefather of our faith. He was an abolitionist on the one hand, but not all of us know he also promoted eugenics and made comments betraying a belief in white Anglo-Saxon superiority on the other hand. And there are more leaders in our movement and beyond it who did not always stand up for what we now consider to be right. Something has been happening in the last few years in our relationship with heroes and leaders. The Me Too movement is a reflection of it, as are statues of Confederate leaders and others being torn down from town squares. That's part of it. Cancel culture is in the mix. We're talking about what was not okay in the past and how to hold people accountable to a fresh understanding of what is okay now, which is good. It's important to evolve in our understanding of social mores and culture, especially if it harmed people in the past. And we're losing our heroes, and that's hard. There is something in human nature that wants to take another person and lift them up, wants them to be better than us, to move us, to inspire us. But then when we discover they're not superhuman, we tear them down. And then we get discouraged, dispirited, maybe even cynical. One of my colleagues raised the very good question recently about whether we want to be putting people on pedestals in the first place. He's from Halifax, Nova Scotia, where a few years ago they had just taken down the statue of their city founder for 18th century acts of brutality against the Mi'kmaq people. After they took it down, the city was stuck with the question of what to do with this very, very tall, hundreds of pounds of solid metal and concrete that had stood at the center of the town square for nearly a century. When they called for public opinions on this question, my colleague suggested they stop looking for places to put it up and just melt the thing down. Create something completely different, like maybe some new human-sized statues of people just sitting around on park benches, looking approachable, perhaps, looking like someone with whom you could sit down, see eye to eye, and maybe even have a heart-to-heart. A way to model getting in there with each other, to talk through the stuff we really need to talk through, like our problematic racial history. His city hasn't fallen for the idea yet, but I love it. Stop putting people on pedestals in the first place, where we pretend they're perfect until inevitably we find out they're not. Instead, put us next to each other, side by side, talking, working stuff out, flaws and all. It is, I think, one of our strengths as Unitarian Universalists, working stuff out one-on-one or in groups, meeting each other where we are, bringing diverse views together and sharing and learning and growing. It's particularly powerful when we don't see eye to eye. There's this great story from the Jewish Talmud that exemplifies this. In the story, a legal dispute between two schools of thought has been going on for years. God eventually resolves the dispute by deciding that while both sides have made arguments that are true, one side prevails. Why? Because that side has made its arguments with humility and goodwill, because that side has listened to and learned from the truths contained in the arguments made by the other. What they won was new insight, and so they prevailed in the grand order of things. And when we are at our best, we do this. And that kind of openness and humility, that kind of conversation and learning is what the world needs right now, especially when it comes to race, especially when it comes to white people and race. Because I've noticed when it comes to race, white people like me, we have a tendency to do the same thing with ourselves and each other that society tends to do with our leaders and heroes, which is that we tend to lift up or put down. We're either good or bad, racism-free or we're not. We're either fine, no problem, no worries, or we, or more often they, are not fine, big problems, lots of worries. I have noticed when a group of liberal white people get together and talk about racism, the conversation eventually seems to slide toward those other people, the racist bad ones, away from ourselves. And we can miss the complexity of any individual story, including our own. Take me, for example. I was taught that there were racists who were bad and there was everyone else who was fine. Racists were people who intentionally tried to hurt people because of race, and there was little worse when I was growing up than to be racist. So I have tried hard all my life to not be that, which for many years in my early adulthood meant just not talking about it at all. And when I did, choosing my words very carefully. More recently, I've noticed that because I've been raised to not be racist, and because I see myself as basically a good person, and because good people and racism are not the same, there's a way my brain tells me nothing I say or do can be racist because I'm good and racists are not. It's a little bit of circular logic. I'm good, so I can't be racist thing, but nevertheless, it feels oddly true. Only more recently have I come to realize that simply believing myself to be free of racism doesn't mean I actually am. In fact, I've come to understand that the definition of racism I grew up with points only to a sliver of the iceberg. Maybe you've come to that realization as well. Those overtly antagonistic white people that were, for example, out in Prescott Park this summer, they may be the most visible, but it is the stuff that the rest of us do or do not do under the surface of the water that keeps that systemic racism frozen in place, which includes the stuff I once thought was explicitly not racist, like genteelly sidestepping the topic altogether. It includes subtle attitudes I had held, even things I thought were helpful, like the time I volunteered at a mostly black inner city elementary school to teach them conflict resolution skills. I got to feel like a hero. And because my life looked better on the outside than theirs, I got to feel just a little superior. I had not heard of white savior complex way back then. But now I look back painfully and I sigh at myself. But there's more. I've noticed I'm more drawn to news stories about people who look like me, and I'm therefore more likely to give time or money to those causes. I have to be intentional about learning and understanding the history of people of color here and in the world because that was not centered when I was growing up. I forget all the time the brutal history that set things up, that redlined black families into poor neighborhoods, the laws that kept them from building wealth, the cruelty of centuries of slavery and Jim Crow, and the violence that is still in the water. Instead, I get swept up into day-to-day life, a life in which most people I know are white, not thinking about racism or racial injustice most of the time, a life where most of the people around me have been conditioned to focus on just what's in front of us. And given so many of us who are white live in mostly white areas, that focus often also just happens to leave huge systems of oppression and attitudes and misconceptions frozen in place under the surface, outside our view. There is a powerful, haunting piece of art. It's a painting that shows a white family enjoying a picnic on a sunny day. In the background, you can just barely make out the body of a black person, lynched, hanging from a tree. None of the characters in the foreground can see it. It's outside their view. In the painting, they don't even have eyes. It's chilling. Once in a while, I get a hint of just how much I am missing, just how distorted the worldview is that I grew up with. Once in a while, I catch sight of the change that is required in me and our society to really move this forward. But because of the insidious nature of racism, because of massive misinformation and distraction and denial that's everywhere, it's almost like I don't have eyes to see. There's a poem by Federico Moramarco. Have you considered the possibility that everything you believe is wrong? Not merely off a bit, but totally wrong. Nothing like things as they really are. If you've done this, you know how durably fragile those phantoms we hold in our heads are. Those wisps of thought that people die and kill for, betray lovers for, give up lifelong friendships for. If you've not done this, you probably don't understand this poem, or think it's not even a poem, but a bit of opaque nonsense, occupying too much of your day's time, so you should probably stop reading it or listening to it now. But if you've arrived at this line, if you're still with me, then maybe, just maybe, you're open to that possibility, the possibility of being absolutely, completely wrong about everything that matters. How different the world seems then. Everyone who was your enemy is now your friend. Everything you hated, you now love. And everything you love slips through your fingers like sand. I've heard it said that racism exacerbates or is a key part of just about every social problem we face today. The glue in our interconnected web of apparently intractable problems. If you put it another way, as we dismantle racism, everything we care about, everything that matters to humankind, everything gets better. So, who's going to lead us out of all of this? What brave, wise, loving leader could possibly move this forward, possibly begin to heal and dismantle, undo the overwhelming situations we face today? You may know where I'm going with this, which is that those leaders, those brave, loving, wise leaders, are us. We regular people with all our flaws, our confusions, our distractions. We regular people with our way too busy lives who do not have time for one more thing. We're the ones. Even if we don't know exactly how, there is, of course, no simple, single solution to untangle this centuries-old devastation of human relations. But we can read and learn and begin to see more and more what racism really looks like in all its forms. We can talk about it, educate each other, interrupt each other's unaware racism. We can do that, even if it feels a little awkward or feels less than genteel. We can learn about the brutal history of slavery and Jim Crow and its aftermath, and then learn some more, and then still more, until it's in our awareness as we go about our daily lives. We can learn about reparations, make reparations, donate to Black causes, shop at Black businesses, read the Vision for Black Lives Matter policy platform and talk about it with others. We can advocate for voting rights legislation. We can vote. We can encourage others to vote. We can bend the arc of the universe toward justice, one act at a time. There is a famous part of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s very last sermon before he was assassinated. I just want to do God's will, he said, and he's allowed me to go up to the mountain, and I've looked over, and I have seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, he said, but I want you to know tonight that we, as a people, we will get to the promised land. So, I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming Lord. Martin Luther King, the human, complex like we are, who made mistakes like we all do, and who had courage beyond belief, a glorious vision to which he stayed true, and a legacy of love as wide as an ocean. I picture sitting next to him on a park bench and allowing his courage and his vision and his love to inspire me, to inspire us as we work with each other, eye to eye, heart to heart, bringing that promised land a little nearer, one conversation, one action, one step at a time. May it be so. Amen. Let us join together in our closing hymn. It's number 168. Please rise in body or in spirit.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Our closing words are from the Reverend Joseph M. Cherry. If we have any hope of transforming the world and changing ourselves, we must be bold enough to step into our own discomfort, brave enough to be clumsy there, loving enough to forgive ourselves and others. May we, as a people of faith, be granted the strength to be so bold, so brave, and so loving. Amen, and go in peace.